Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Jane Powell. Jane, I haven't had an opportunity to interview another Powell, so welcome to the set.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And there is no relationship between you and I, so other than the name is the same. So but it's great to have you here. So Jane, I wanted to really have you as a guest because you are also our first guest from Golden, so it's great to have you on the show. You've written 2 books, and your most recent book is Butterflies in the System.
Yeah.
And I just was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about your second book.
Sure. And thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So Butterflies in the System follows a year in the life of 5 teenagers in the youth protection system in Montreal.
Okay.
It is, I wrote it as fiction,
Right.
but it's based on interviews I did with people who had been in the system or worked in the system, as well as my own experience as a teenager in the system back in the early 90s.
Okay. So Butterflies in the System, so I wanted to explore that title just a little bit. Tell me, what do you mean by the system?
So the system, the youth protection system, encompasses foster homes, shelters, group homes, and youth detention centers. And I'm specifically talking about the ones in Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to me that there's a personal connection to the story. You sort of alluded to that already. Can you just sort of expand on what motivated you to write the book and how it all came about?
Sure. Well, currently a class action suit was filed in 2019 against the Quebec government on behalf of people who had been abused and neglected in the youth protection system. So I thought it was time to tell my story, and not just my story, but there are just so many stories. So I wanted to give a more encompassing view of what goes on in the system, so that's why I interviewed other people too, and I wrote it as fiction, so I could put everybody's stories together and then bring some awareness to the public about what goes on in the youth protection system.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's an important story to tell?
I think it's a really important story to tell. If I just think back to I'll tell you a little story about what happened, why I became a system kid.
Okay.
Because I grew up in a middle-class family. There were no, huge issues when I was a kid or anything. But my story is very, it's not unique. So many girls have similar stories. And so many kids, every kid who enters the system enters with trauma. And so my path into the system started when I was 14 and I was sexually assaulted. And at that time, in the late 80s, there were no resources available for teenagers who had been sexually assaulted. There were no resources for my parents, there were no resources in the school. So basically, I was left to, to struggle through my PTSD and depression and anxiety by myself, and that led to a lot of anger.
Right.
It led to skipping school. It led to I went from a straight A student to failing classes. There was a lot of conflict at home, so I would take off from home and not show up when I was supposed to, and stuff like that. So the whole thing culminated in me being admitted into the youth protection system. Yeah.
So your book sort of in a novel form or in a fictional setting takes that story and tells the story. What message do you think the book conveys to maybe ones that have suffered similar situations?
Yeah, so this is what I'm getting at, is that once we got into the youth protection system, everybody comes there with trauma, but once you get in there, there are also no resources offered, no professional therapy, no aging out plan. The staff is very poorly trained. They have some odd policies, like in youth detention centers, they still to this day practice solitary confinement, and we're talking about children here. So by the time, so kids come in with trauma, and then they are re-traumatized, you know, because of neglect and these abusive or ethical violations kind of, you know, that go on there. And then on their 18th birthday, because in Quebec, that's when you become an adult, when you turn 18, you go from having a bed and food every day, like security, to make your own way.
Right.
And there's no plan, you know, there's no like training or anything to prepare kids. So in my situation, I couldn't deal with it. By the time I got to 2 weeks before my aging out, I had attempted suicide. I couldn't deal with it, you know? And again, my story is not unique,
Right.
you know? So I need to tell it because these kinds of things are still going on in the youth protection system. And every now and then, it explodes in the media, like CTV, W5. I was actually interviewed for that episode, Demand for Justice, which was about a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so every once in a while, there's a big splash in the media, and then that's what it is. It's a big splash, and then the ripples die down and disappear, and nothing really happens. There's no change. So I thought by writing my book, like my forte is creative writing. So I thought by using creative writing, maybe I can reach those people who, like the public, in a more kind of relatable way, and maybe ongoing, where it'll keep them thinking. Yeah.
So sort of a way of creating some awareness of the issue.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
hopefully having it addressed long term rather than sort of just ignored or swept under the carpet or that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so how do you feel you achieved that? How do you feel that it all went together with your book?
I think it's going really well. I mean, I've since the class action suit started, there's all these people are finding each other. We're all so we are now this really big supportive group of youth protection alumni, you know, who are all really trying hard to bring more awareness around what's going on, so we can change the system for the children that are there today. Yeah, so it's.
So how many people are we talking about? Like you said.
Well, there are thousands involved in the class action suit.
Okay.
If this thing goes through, it's the largest class action suit in Canadian history.
Wow.
It's huge. So, and in the support network that I'm talking about particularly, I mean, I think we have a Facebook page, and I think there are around 300 in our group. On that page.
Right.
Yeah, but there are many more out there that don't use the internet and
Right.
reach out here and there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So without going into a lot of detail, because I don't want you to give away the story.
No.
But tell us about Butterflies in the System and maybe some of the characters and some of the sort of highlights within the book.
Some of the highlights. Well, like I said, so I wrote it as fiction. I love creative writing. I love adventure, and I love laughter. And I find that even in the really down times in life, you still have adventure and laughter. There's no, like, it's still there, you know? So in my books, I always bring adventure and laughter into there. So, like, for example, during Butterflies in the System at one point, 2 of the girls are on AWOL. They've run away. And they don't have any money, and they need to survive. So they put their heads together, and they come up with a business plan. And I can't tell you exactly what the business plan is, but it's quite the kind of business plan that 16-year-old teenagers might come up with.
Right.
And it doesn't go as they hoped in the end, but along the way there's some laughter, and yeah, it's an adventure. Yeah.
So did that format, the fictional approach to the story, taking, a real life situation, did that give you some freedom to write about the subject that was, so important to you? Oh,
yes, absolutely. If I was to write like a biography or something, then it would be you'd only see my story, but I felt that my story is actually quite mild compared to some other stories that need to be told. And there are so many kids in the system, but very, very few have written books. Because many don't fare well when they leave the system.
And so you really wrote your story down, and you added in the other stories from the interviews that you.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So was that, in a sense, therapeutic for yourself?
It was very therapeutic, and just interviewing people. I mean, some of the people I interviewed were really exciting. I interviewed Victor Malarick. He was a CTV W5 host for many years, and he was in the system himself. So some people really do succeed after the system.
Right.
And he wrote a book about it as well. So that was very interesting to interview him. I also interviewed Jillian Cosgrove, who is the journalist who broke open a huge story in the 70s about abuses in the system for the Montreal Gazette. And Erica Taffel, who's a local author too. She wrote Slave to the Farm, and that was also about the system in Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah, so there were some really great conversations that I had there, where I could take the bits and everybody's experiences and create a book that kind of supported all our stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it gave you a really nice venue to put all those stories together. What's been the reaction to your book?
Oh, it's been very positive. I've been getting some good reviews, and people like to be taken into different worlds as well. It is a different world. It's kind of a hidden world. We don't talk about that world. Right. We don't talk about the kids who are not making it.
Right.
And so it's really nice to see that people are being opened up to what's going on behind those doors.
So you're really building awareness around the issue. And so when's the class action suit?
So it was filed, actually we have an information session next week sometime, so I'm not sure, I won't know how far it's come until that. But it looks positive. There was a similar one that just went through in Ontario, so it looks like it should go through, but I don't know a lot about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So several times you've mentioned, Jane, that you love creative writing, and that's a nice way to express yourself and so forth. What prompted that love in creative writing?
It's kind of, I've always liked creative writing, but when my youngest son, who's now 13, when he was a baby, he was like, I have 3 kids, and he was the first one who actually slept for 3 hours in the afternoon. Okay. And he was sleeping at night too. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with myself? I've always wanted to write a book. And so I started Skybound Misfit. That's my first book. Right. And during chapter 3, he stopped sleeping in the afternoon. And so the book sat around for 10 years, 3 chapters complete, until he turned old enough for me to kind of have more freedom and complete the book. Okay.
Yeah, you do need that time, don't you, to focus on getting the book done.
Yeah.
So you alluded to your first book, and let's just talk a little bit about that for a moment as well. So this is your second book, which came out when? The new one came out at the end of October 2020. Okay, and when was the first one? It was 2018. Okay, so tell us about the first one.
So the first one is kind of like, although the characters are, or the protagonist is different in Skybound Misfit than it is in Butterflies in the System, the protagonist in Butterflies in the System makes an appearance in Skybound Misfit. Okay. I needed to tell more of her story, so I decided to write a book about her. Okay. But Skybound Misfit is basically, like, both of these protagonists are parts of me. They're just different parts. And Skybound Misfit is about Frankie and her experience as a younger teenager before she goes through like a sexual assault, and then the effects that this assault has on her. You know, she goes through, there's a lot of stigma around it. She goes through, like, she's bullied and all sorts of stuff, and how she deals with it. And I really wanted to discuss with that one the effects, because people don't really think, I think, about, it's not just like an assault and then it's over. There's like years of effects, you know, so I wanted to talk about that, like how it affects teenagers and their paths and their decision making.
So there is a connection between the two books, but would it be necessary to read one?
No, you can read them separately.
Okay.
I mean, you do get like a little bit extra if you read them both, because you kind of, because Sam, the protagonist in Butterflies in the System, she does make up a decent part of the book. Like, she is Frankie's best friend for a while in the first book. So you get a bit more insight into her if you read the first book, but you don't have to at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So as writers, we think that everyone's our audience. We think everyone should read our book, right?
Yeah.
But really, who is the audience, do you believe, for your books?
Well, I think when I have asked myself this question, because they are about teenagers, and I think, so I classify them as YA, and I
Which
do
is
know
young adult,
youth,
right?
yeah, young adult.
Yeah.
I do know that youth have enjoyed them. And I don't know why this is, if youth just don't write reviews as much, but the reviews that I get and the really strong feedback is from adults. Yeah, and not just women, like adults, men, women, yeah, have, yeah.
Oh, good.
So I guess maybe contemporary fiction or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to take a few minutes to explore the publishing process as well. So you're self-published, is that correct?
I am,
Okay.
yeah.
How was that experience?
You know, ideally, it wouldn't be so bad to be traditionally published, but I'm a very impatient person.
Yeah.
I have, both my books had a message to tell, and the timing was right there. My first book, The Me Too Movement, was like, had really picked up. This was the time to publish. I didn't want to wait 2 years for a traditional publisher to pick me up. And then with this book, the class action suit was on the table, filed. I needed to publish. So yeah, so I went with self-publishing.
Yeah. Timing was of the essence, so you controlled the timing.
Mostly
but-
that's
yeah.
that
Okay.
was the issue.
So
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about the design, you know, the actual formatting and getting the book published? How did that all go?
It's exciting. I chose, you know, the images that I wanted on the front of the book. I put a lot of thought into that. So I'm a very indecisive person when
Right.
it comes to, yeah. So and I was very happy with the work done on the designs of the books. Yeah.
Well, I have to commend you. The books, you know, project themselves very well. They read well, and they're well put together. So
Yeah,
you've done a
thank
good
you.
job.
Thank
of that.
you. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've seen some self-published books that, you know, are a little less quality, but you know, nice quality, and obviously it shows that you were really interested in creating a quality product there.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of reading, so I know what I like to read. So I would like to read. I would like to write like that.
Right. So we're just going to wrap up in a moment here, Jane. But 2 books written. Does that mean you're working on a 3rd book? Or
I am. I'm working on a 3rd book, and it's exciting. I'm really excited about it. It's a bit different. It's inspired by my grandmother, who immigrated to from Dublin to Saskatchewan in the 50s, alone with 2 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, as a teacher. So, and she has an exciting story. So, yeah.
That's got my interest already. Just before we finish here, can you just tell me what the literary scene in Golden is like?
Golden is extremely creative. We have a lot of artists. There are a few writers as well. A lot of readers, a lot of book clubs, which is good for my sales. Yeah, it's quite an interesting place. Golden is, yeah. It attracts the creative minds, I think. Yeah.
And how has it been to launch a book in COVID times?
I thought it would be more difficult, but because I'm on social media and I have a website, which I'll tell you the address, before we stop here.
Okay, what is the address?
It's easy, janepowell.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, Jane, it's been a pleasure to have you as a guest on Talking Kootenay Books, and congratulations on your second book. I know your heart and soul has gone into both of those publications, and we appreciate you actually taking the time to come down from Golden and be our guest on Talking Kootenay Books. Thank you again, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
This is Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. On Talking Kootenay Books, we have the opportunity of talking to writers and authors throughout the region. And today we're going to expand our scope a little bit, and we've invited Karin von Wittgenstein from the Kimberley Public Library. Karin, what is your role at the library?
I'm a library director at the Kimberley Public Library, have been for about 13 years now.
Okay, so what does that involve? What do you do every day?
Oh, what do I do every day? You know, being a director of a public library is a wonderful position to explore the community, to encourage the community's growth, collaborate.
So let's specifically talk about your role as a director and the operations, day-to-day operations. How does the library operate? Who funds it? What's the governance model? So forth.
We're a municipal library, so City of Kimberley is our major funder, our main funder. We're also funded by the province with the Ministry of Education, Libraries Branch. RDAK is a large funder as well and supporter, and we're also funded by our patrons through donations and the Friends of the Public Library. They're very generous every year, giving us a grant for wonderful opportunities for programming, for furniture, and for other things is mainly what the Friends of the Library provide.
I notice they have a tremendous used bookstore, so they must provide a bit of a support through that as well, right?
That's their main fundraiser, and actually that bookstore is quite a destination for many people in outlying communities, so it's a really successful little hub of activity for sure.
Yeah. I have to say I've contributed a few dollars to used books there too.
There you go.
They've got a good selection, so it's always nice to visit that. So maybe typically, let's just go to an annual number. How many people may visit the library in a year?
I would say I can tell you by circulation of physical items of over 50,000.
Wow.
So we're still actually circulating, but visits for computer visits, we have about, well, I'm speaking pre-COVID days, 700 in a month computer users. So the public computers are a pretty vital service that we offer. Yeah, but...
Okay. And let's just talk about normal times. In normal times, what kind of services would you provide beyond just people checking out books?
One-on-one technology assistance, always assistance with the computers, programming, in-house programming, and we do outreach for our people that can't come to the library. We bring the library to them. Lots of different services for different age groups. We partner with schools, and some of our services we take right into the schools and serve a larger group all at once with that.
So Karin, you've sort of highlighted it just in your last couple of comments, but why is a local public library so important to a community?
A library is an essential service to a community. It helps build the community. It's a resource that anybody of any background, of any income, of any situation can come without any concern for judgment or having to spend money. It's just essential. It's hard to...
Great resource, and I like
Yeah.
the fact that it's a level playing field. It's accessible by everybody, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I just wanted to also explore the fact that, you know, and I have to thank you for this because you've been very generous in supporting local writers and authors. Is that something that you sort of go out of your way to do?
I do. I look at every author as a VIP, and that's the reason we have libraries, is because people write those wonderful novels and books and resources, and so every author I do actually treat as a VIP, yourself included. So.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate it. I wanted to ask you about the sort of the umbrella organizations that represent libraries. So we've got one in the Kootenays, and then we have a provincial one. How does that all work?
The Kootenay Library Federation it's not a governing body, it's basically a support for the different Kootenay libraries. So there's 19, or I think now 20 libraries that are included in the Kootenay Library Federation.
So does that allow you to interact with other libraries?
Yes, and it's an incredible resource for learning with and from your colleagues, and professional development opportunities. We purchase things collaboratively, so we save money. The larger organization is the Association of British Columbia Public Library Directors, or thank goodness, ABCPLD, it's a little simpler. And throughout COVID, we have worked together much more just collaboratively, regularly, and that has been a wonderful learning and supportive resource, is that association.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, there's a flip side to every challengers and opportunities. So it looks like you've taken those opportunities to maybe connect with not only the community, but also your professional associates as well.
Yes, it's been extremely valuable.
Yeah. Karin, thank you for being our guest on Talking Kootenay Books. I really appreciate it, giving us an insight into what a public or community library is all about. We appreciate your work.
Thank you very much.
This is Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell.